Little Archie, Issue 86, A Story from Space. Sabrina says while holding a science book that there might be a lot of places with life in it. Then she speaks with absolute certainty about what one of those places is like, which would only make sense if she went there or was told about it because she's a witch, since witches can go to other planets. On the planet Fufu, the people there can fly, and some of the people complain that their monster movies are doing terrible because people aren't scared very easily. So they decide to make a monster movie about Sabrina's family. They're terrified of them just from seeing them. And someone decides to send a crew there to do some recording. An actor's terrified of her too and has to be talked into doing the movie. He goes into a spaceship and is expected to meet Sabrina. Of all people. He flies towards Sabrina and she sneezes, which is caught on film. Conveniently, all of the aliens here can speak English. I guess because the fates who made the universe got really lazy designing languages. More likely it's just a huge coincidence. Jughead tries to pick him up and scares him, and the story ends with the aliens seeing Jughead use him as an ice cream cone, even though he clearly talked in front of Jughead. This story was hard to care about because it focused entirely on aliens and could have starred anybody, considering that Sabrina didn't use any magic in the story. So it didn't have to be a little Sabrina story. It's about the idea that tiny aliens would find humans to be terrifying monsters for a monster movie. There's no reason Jughead would bother the alien like that. This was much more of an Archie's Madhouse Space Patrol story. And I just have to assume that the only reason Sabrina knew about these aliens is that she was shown the movie by her aunts after a trip to the witch world. Little Archie, Issue 87, A Little Story. Archie decides to buy a dog a flea collar, but the pet store is closed, and Sabrina says her aunts could help them out. She goes inside, but her aunts aren't home, which I hope gets explained. She says she's seen her aunt Zelda make it herself, but she puts in too much of something and accidentally makes her friends shrink. This cures the dog of his flea problem, because his fleas shrunk to a lethal extent. They get threatened by Salem because it's evil. And somehow Sabrina took this long to figure out that she could say a spell to return everyone to normal. So everyone goes back to normal no problem instead of the story being padded out with nonsense, like her spell not working, and her having to find a magic cure to their problem, and having to get her aunt's help, like in later comics. Zelda says she'll make flea powder for the dog at last. Sadly, the story ends without explaining why Sabrina's aunts weren't home. They don't have jobs. This story was about Sabrina trying to make flea powder with potion ingredients because she saw Zelda do it and her aunts weren't home. For some reason. Is there any reason she didn't just magically summon flea powder? Instead, she really wants to prove she can make some, and ends up doing it wrong and shrinking her friends. But if she can just cast a spell to return them to normal when Salem's chasing them, she should have done that a lot earlier. And the dog at least gets the flea powder at the end. It's amazing how little there is to say about this issue. There's a reason every issue can't be its own video. The fleas wouldn't have disappeared. They would have just shrunken so badly that it would have been lethal to them. Because obviously there's really small things in existence, like atoms. Little Archie, Issue 88, A Magic Story. Jughead orders some burgers, and Sabrina warns him that they're going to be late for school, and Grundy said that he'll stay after school if he doesn't start showing up on time, because she wants to encourage people not to show up late at a young age to make it into a habit, because being late for work can get you fired. Sabrina casts a spell to make Jughead warp to his desk before the last bell rings. Grundy actually asks him how he got into the room so fast, and he says he doesn't know. It makes sense if he was playing dumb, and Grundy wondered if he was a witch too and then dropped it because she assumed Sabrina did it. Grundy tells Jughead to hand in his homework. Jughead says he ran to school so fast that they blew away in the wind, and because she smells burgers with onions on his breath. She somehow takes that as an excuse to give him detention. I say this because she asks how the wind went again, and has a thought bubble with a burger in it. She could have made it clear that she's only punishing him for not having homework to hand in. Or because she knows that he went to Pop-Tate and Sabrina warped him here and so he should have been late. This story was about Jughead wanting to eat at Pop-Tate's instead of get to class in time, so his lack of self-control almost gets him late. Sabrina warps into his desk, but he doesn't have homework to hand in, so he gets punished anyways. That was depressing. And you'd think Jughead would have burger breath every morning, so that doesn't prove anything. Little Archie, Issue 89, On Stage. Sabrina says there's nothing to do and no one to talk to. She wishes Salem could talk. and uses magic to make it the case. This story really was ahead of its time. She's excited that he can talk, and Salem tells her to change the cat food he's being given, being an inconvenience. I like that Sabrina's polite to him and asks him what he'd like instead. He says he'd like to eat a roast bird instead, and Sabrina grabs him and threatens him with a harsh punishment, instead of simply using magic to create a roast bird for him to eat. Thankfully, he decides to say he'll settle for a saucer of milk. She agrees and decides to leave. Salem talks in front of Reggie while trying to go after the bird, which scares Reggie, driving home the point that it's better that Salem can't talk, if the alternative is him making magic too obvious by not even trying to hide that he can, which is truly what the evil 70s Salem would be like. He says he can sing and dance too, and Reggie cleverly has the composure to try to befriend him. He tells him he'll get him lots of birds, and brings Salem to the talent show. Sabrina casts a spell to get shown where Salem went, and sees him singing with Reggie at the talent show. They're offered money, and Salem says all he wants is a different cat food, and says he'll be going home now instead of at least trying to ask Reggie for cat food. Reggie could have easily been smart enough at this point to tell him he'll get him the cat food he wants, since he already promised him birds. Why did he say that all he wanted was a different cat food instead of birds? Instead, he made an enemy out of him by trapping him in a chest. Sabrina goes over to the chest and uses magic to get him out. Sabrina fills Reggie's bag with black soot and makes the wise decision to return everything to normal. She could also cast a spell to keep him from talking around mortals in particular, but she was annoyed by him at first. This story was about Sabrina casting a spell to make Salem talk, and explaining why it's not always the case. Because Reggie heard him talk, he gets lured to a talent show by him, and instead of Reggie simply promising him cat food, he traps him in a box for Sabrina to find. It wouldn't have helped him either way though, because Sabrina could easily use magic to find out where he was. It's so ironic that the comic dedicated a story to showing why Salem being able to talk wouldn't be worth it, and has to be undone. I enjoyed being able to talk though. We got to see his personality better. And it could have been dealt with in a more merciful way to the cat, making him unable to talk when mortals are in earshot. Little Archie issue 90. Turn around. Sabrina's overwhelmed by being told to clean her room and bring out the trash by her aunts. Sabrina uses magic and gets told to pick up a newspaper when she comes home. I don't remember her aunts in this comic constantly telling her to do stuff for them like a slave. It should have been the teacher that caused Sabrina to get mad about this, instead of her aunts being like this for just one story. Sabrina's tired of adults telling her to do stuff because they're adults, and casts a spell to make the adults change places with the kids. She assumes her spell didn't work too easily, only to find out Archie's still in the 5th grade in an adult role, somehow. After that failed joke that would have worked better for Moose, Sabrina finds out she's the teacher. So she sees Weatherby pull Grundy's hair for always telling on him. Grundy has white hair as a kid too, for no reason. Another kid misbehaves, and Sabrina walks out of the class during class somehow to take them both to see the principal. Who knows what's happening in class while she's away? Dilton's the principal now. How does her magic decide who to make the teacher and principal? I assume it picks the smartest guy for the job of principal to be responsible. Dilton's more interested in reading books though, and the lunch bell rings already. Jughead's the chef, so he eats everything on the menu before anyone could get there. Why would her magic think he wouldn't do that and make him the chef? Some kids get into a fight over the last piece of pie, and Sabrina uses magic to return everything to normal. Conveniently, Weatherby decides not to make an evil bully stay after school, unfortunately. This story is about Sabrina casting a spell to make the kids and adults switch places because she's tired of adults telling her what to do. But she should have known that would always be the case regardless of age, and adults have that on top of their own problems. And why did her magic make Jughead the school chef? And that was the only reason she wanted to go back to normal. Because kids started fighting over the last piece of pie. It wasn't showing the problems she'd have with being an adult for real, which defeats the point of the plot. Instead had a contrivance talk her out of it. I get why she'd associate Jughead with food, but he would be a better fit for the job of an eating contest contestant, or food critic. Little Archie, issue 91, a magic show. Hilda tells Zelda her uncle plays the piano by ear, and Zelda says her uncle fiddles with his beard. And Sabrina reveals that they're just telling jokes after Hilda says she'll forget she owes Zelda $5 if she gives her some time, which is actually a pretty charming joke. Reggie is confident he'll win the talent show, and since he's so confident, he's told he should wear a cheerleading outfit. Surprisingly, Reggie likes the sound of that and gets told he could cheer for himself. Sabrina says her aunts will be in the talent show, which is weird because I'd expect it to only be for kids. Sabrina's told that if the audience hates an act, they'll be honest about it. Instead of Sabrina simply using magic to change her aunt's mind about participating, or at least telling them she doesn't want to, which might work because they're so nice in this comic, they go to the talent show and we see the rare sight of someone making fun of their witch costumes. Thankfully, I get to see Reggie screw up his juggling act, and then Sabrina's aunts make jokes, with Zelda making puns. I can appreciate the effort they took in coming up with these things to say. Their first joke is weak, but the second one is amusing. But would make more sense for Hilda to say it because she's the snarky one and Zelda's the ditz in this comic. Someone boos them and someone wants a fish thrown at them. So Hilda summons a shark to scare him away. And conveniently, the audience just thinks it's funny instead of being scared that the obvious witches are going to target them next. But it's smart of them to laugh because that's clearly what they wanted. The only way this would make sense is if the audience not being scared of witches and wanting to hunt them down was part of the shark summoning spell. Sabrina makes it so obvious she's a witch that it makes sense that everyone already found out about witches and got used to a long time ago, which is the only other explanation for their casual reaction to this. They're not saying they think they have hologram projectors. So the ants start using magic to entertain the crowd. Hilda pulls a broom out of a hat and they do the saw trick with real magic. So they win the talent show, and Zelda invites everyone to her house graciously for ice cream and cookies. And Sabrina stupidly wonders how she could feed all those people. Of course, she uses magic to summon them. And somehow the story ends with Reggie wondering how Hilda pulled the broom out of her hat, when he proved in earlier issues that he knew Sabrina was a witch and is very quick to suspect her. And her aunts aren't even trying to hide what they really are, which is of course part of the charm. This story was about Sabrina's aunt somehow entering a talent show at Sabrina's school. I assume they used the brainwashing spell so that they could enter when they're adults. And after their jokes don't entertain the audience, though I appreciate the clever dialogue that came with it, they eventually use magic to impress the audience and win the talent show as magicians. I'll take a lighthearted story any day, but it's still confusing that nobody freaks out. Little Archie issue 92. Some change. Archie and Jughead decide to recklessly mix each other's chemicals in chemistry class just to see what happened, and nobody stops them, like a teacher, almost as if they were the only ones in the class. They run out of the class avoiding a smell, and Weatherby smells it and goes over to them. Sabrina decides to use magic to make them love the smell, and have to assume that part of the smell involves them not being suspicious that suddenly they like it. It's a bad idea to make them want to keep smelling a potentially dangerous substance that might smell bad to them to warn them to stay away from it. She just wanted to keep them from getting in trouble, but she could have just cast a spell on Weatherby so that he wouldn't want to punish them. Jughead tries to drink the test tube, and somehow Archie and Jughead are dumb enough to think that's a good idea. Even Weatherby doesn't think to stop him. Sabrina should have used magic to prevent this. Realistically, it'd be lethal for him. I have to just assume that part of her spell was that the substance would be harmless to him. After all, the only reason it'd actually smell like chocolate milkshake is if that's what it turned into. Archie's mad that Jughead didn't leave any for him and storms off. Then Grundy screams at seeing Jughead and runs away instead of just assuming he's wearing a wolf mask and asking where he got it. I'd rather not give him homework than punish him though. Jughead goes back to normal as I wonder why the spell would make this happen to him when Sabrina wouldn't want that. I guess the magic decided to replace the chemical he was going to drink with a magic potion that happens to smell like chocolate milkshake, but also makes his face briefly look like a monster, and magic knew that but Sabrina didn't. Magic is like a computer. It has access to information that the user doesn't to work. But we should be told that it was a potion. The coach doesn't like seeing Jughead show up for football. Then why hasn't he kicked him off the team? How is he even put on the team? He says he'll let him carry the ball in the hopes of getting him to quit the team because he'd be knocked silly. That seems abusive compared to him simply kicking him off like a normal coach. He even secretly tells the boys to tackle Jughead to make sure it happens instead of relying on luck. Thankfully, he says he can't look, so he does have some compassion. Predictably, the spell makes Jughead's face look weird and scares the team away. Weatherby then sees Archie and Jughead's science equipment left out and suddenly has some of the potion to drink when Archie said there wasn't any left for him, and Jughead didn't correct him. Somehow Weatherby's too dumb to live and drinks the chemical. Where's the chemistry teacher in all of this? So Sabrina sees Weatherby with a scary face and uses magic to change him back. See, it's justified that a spell lasted the whole story because Sabrina wasn't aware of the consequences until the very end. And the minute she was, she could simply undo them. Somehow, Sabrina didn't catch up to Jughead until weeks later. That makes no sense because she could just use magic to get to him right away. And isn't Jughead her friend? Doesn't she see him all the time? She goes to the same class as him. It ends with the school getting their first unbeaten season in football thanks to Jughead. So it's an unearned trophy. This story was about Archie and Jughead's reckless mixing of chemicals in the chemistry lab causing a bad smell that attracts Weatherby. And Sabrina uses magic to make it smell good to keep them out of trouble. Somehow they're all too dumb to live and want to drink the chemical, and Sabrina doesn't use magic to make them not want to do that. And we just have to assume her magic independently changed the chemical into a magic werewolf potion she wasn't fully knowledgeable about, because it smelled like a chocolate milkshake. And it was the first potion with that smell that her magic found in its databanks. But it's confusing because without assuming that, why did Sabrina not know about the wolf face effect? Wouldn't she have to imagine it for it to happen otherwise? Sabrina doesn't undo the spell until she finds out what it did to Weatherby, but somehow it takes her weeks to undo it for Jughead. And it wasn't worth it because the school shouldn't win an award just because of magic.